Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to start in a moment. We're just waiting for everyone to join. Okay, I see my numbers have stabilized, so we're just gonna kick off and go straight into the program. My name is Ntomfuthi Ntuli. I am CEO of the South African Wind Energy Association, and I will be chairing the first part of the session today. And I am also joined by my colleague, Niveshan Govender, who is a COO of the South African PV Industry Association, and he will host the Q&A at the end of the program. We are having this session during a very difficult week in the country, where we have seen a scourge of riots throughout the country, something very sad to witness, and we hope that we will come out of this as a country stronger and able to rebuild the economy. And this also coincides very badly with COVID-19 third wave, and it's very difficult for the country to cope under the circumstances. But we are here, and we would like to see the sector, the energy sector, continuing to contribute to the economy. And we are glad that you are able to join us today, and we look forward to the session. This is the third installment of the Developing Local Value Chain webinar series, something that we started with the Solar PV Industry Association in partnership with the IPP office, also in partnership with BEPA and REEF. And we are very proud that we have delivered sessions that have added value in terms of educating the public about the value of renewables, but this time also about the opportunities that exist within the renewable energy value chain. The REEF program was specifically designed to capture opportunities to localize manufacturing of renewable energy components and through the local content requirements. So this webinar will expose opportunities to manufacture renewable energy components locally. In the past, we did see an increase in local manufacturing facilities as a result of local content requirements. But we also learned a lesson that for these investments to be sustainable, we need a stable and conducive policy environment and long-term visibility of procurement plans so that these manufacturing facilities that get set up are actually sustainable, they're able to keep the jobs, and they're able to contribute in a long term to the economy. So now that government has communicated plans to procure 6,800 megawatts of renewable energy over the next 12 months, this opens an opportunity for new investments to supply much needed local content in the sector. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Francis Jackson from Green Cape. He is going to talk to us about economics of renewable energy, local manufacturing. Francis, we have known him for a long time in the sector, has a background in infrastructure development, financing, asset management, and governance. He developed Amakhala, Emoyeni Wind Farm, as well as West Coast One. And so he's someone who's been very involved in wind power development over many years. As an investment principal at AIM, he dealt with ESG and asset management on several wind farm boards. And he is presently leading the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, a master plan that is being developed by the Green Cape team. And over and above that, they are also assisting Mpumalanga to replicate the concept of Green Cape in that province. So without taking more of your time, Francis, I would like to hand over to you. We look forward to learning from you, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Ntombi, and it's great to see everyone here. I see many names who've actually been part of this effort, who've contributed to the thinking we're developing in Green Cape. I've been asked to speak on the economics. I'm not an economist. Some would say that the economics is a science backward inducted from the dynamics of social systems. So part of what I'll be speaking to is what are the dynamics around the opportunity in localizing some of the manufacturing in the renewable energy value chain. We're going to then hear from some of those for whom it's their lived experience, and I will talk to some of the observations on system drivers, outcomes, and enablers. And I'd like to give recognition to the Green Cape team who are working on this theme, who've contributed to these insights, as well as, of course, to many of those who are present on this webinar. So firstly, just some conceptual stuff. Economically speaking, in terms of the benefits that could come from the local manufacturing, we've got jobs, we've got contribution to economic growth, and looking at manufacturing amongst the other aspects, other sectors, we can calculate the expected contribution from each of these sectors, whether it's jobs or contribution to GDP by multipliers. And you'll see manufacturing is a particularly high multiplier when it comes to employment and contribution to GDP. So let's take IRP 2019 as our baseline, just to get a sense of the scale of the opportunity. I know there are many ways of interpreting the numbers. There's many different assumptions that can be used. There's also quite a lot of excitement around how we may potentially see future scenarios that build on IRP 2019 and in fact involve much higher megawatts involved. For example, in opportunities in hydrogen, that's quite topical right now. But within these range of different estimates, there's no debate that the scale of opportunity is quite significant. And I'll break it down into construction and balance of plant, operation and maintenance, and then manufacturing. You'll see, construction and BOP, there's a tendency to localize organically, provided there's the sufficient pipeline and the sustained rollout. Operations and maintenance, they've seen a growing spectrum of local providers. And then manufacturing has, I mentioned, this high GDP multiplier. It does require some deliberate measures to maximize, and the stop-start nature to date has meant that that we actually are seeing, we kind of have to look back to pre-2015 levels to see where we take off from right now. So these numbers here, again, I mentioned there are variations on this. The point of the exercise is to see that looking at jobs as one of the impacts, it's significant, even just based on IRP 2019. We've seen two ways of looking at jobs, job years versus a kind of snapshot headcount. Lots of debates about which one we should be using. That's why I'm showing them both. If you were to look at the full potential, assuming up to 100% from wind and solar alone, you can see some of the opportunity here, noting that there've been some 55,000 job years to date in REEP from one resource, and 54 billion rand in local content expenditure up to December 2019. So we could see by 2030, as a snapshot, some 40,000 jobs, headcount, and almost 300,000 in work done, if you like, or job years. Now, if you take the turnover and the investment in each of these, you would see that manufacturing, due to its multiplier, makes a relatively high contribution to GDP versus construction and operation. So, cut a long story short on some of the growing insights, there are some challenges and bottlenecks that pop up in trying to achieve this opportunity. I'm going to just put them all in front of us here and then talk to what are the kinds of levers or areas of focus that might unlock some. Everyone is familiar with the consistent refrain that uncertainty in the market or market consistency is prime, and that's got to be an area of focus. Also, there are many barriers to entry for emerging suppliers, and the cost, availability, and quality assurance of local materials, access to export and trade opportunities. Then how do we see attractiveness for investment in transition hotspots in particular? Price competitiveness of local supply, matching skills, demand, and availability, and also availability of climate finance. Many discussions under the bridge, much research, but in summary, a set of enabling areas to work on to tackle these. Naturally, this question of how do we really bed in market certainty, the consistency and the growth trajectory that that is enough to make a business case for investment on, industry transformation, the big area of development of local content policy, and building that input materials cost, quality, and availability, ways to leverage trade and export support for regional opportunities. And then not directly manufacturing per se, but one of the key areas to ensure that the demand is there are areas of focus for ensuring that we have system readiness, whether it's in grid integration or systems in government or municipalities to enable that growth. And then to address new entrants support and incentives there. How do we ensure local manufacturing competitiveness? And that means competitiveness locally and on the international field. And then that alignment of local skills with the need, as well as the creation of that skills pool for export. And then to work to integrate with transition hotspots. Now, in each of these, there could be many levers to work on. I'm going to just hone in on one of those sets of dynamics here, which any entering investor would need to be aware of. And there's basically two kind of approaches to that business case that we see. In the one case, do you trigger your investment on securing sufficient single offtake agreement to make the business case, or are you investing based on long-term market certainty? And we've seen both, right? We've seen cases where the manufacturer waits for securement of preferred bidder status or financial close or notice to proceed, and then on a very tight timeline has to ramp up to full production capacity to meet their commitments for that particular bid. This is a short-term play, and timing is really of the essence. The risk there is carried through that chain of private to private contracting, from bidder through to the EPC, the OEM, and suppliers, and ultimately materials. But it's quite sensitive to factors outside of the control of the players here. So, for example, delays in building plan approvals. We can take a worked example of those who managed to tackle this successfully at the outset. GRI working with coordination of building plan approvals in Atlantis managed to go from the decision to proceed to rolling off the production line in 11 months. Conversely, we've also seen, up to pre-bid window 4, many investments based on market certainty in the longer term. So here, the feedback loop's more delayed. You need that trust to build up. It's a bit like, some people say it takes one betrayal to lose trust and 7 incidents to build it again. And in some ways, we have to start from there again, and it requires mitigating risks such as in certain cycles of procurement. So again, in each of these, there could be many possible concrete interventions. We'll just take one as an example. I'm not putting them forward as necessarily the solution to all our problems, but these are things that are being discussed. So take the market certainty, especially now with the 100 megawatt generation license cap being lifted to 100 megawatts. Increase in off-taker diversity is a key enabler. If there's the ability to see many different ways bringing your product to market through the megawatts, that is one of them, and this would be enabled through the wheeling and trading frameworks. How you allocate financial risk. Are there innovative financial instruments that are the kind of equivalent of political risk insurance, or means to put some of that risk into other parts of your establishment, whether it's favorable lease terms with your SEZ that can bear some of that risk. I don't know, but very strong here is also this question of if we can see demand growth and significant demand growth, that increases the overall certainty and reduces the risk of losing a market altogether. And that could be, for example, through sector coupling, or the introduction of significant offtake opportunities for the creation of green hydrogen. So export of hydrogen, green hydrogen would by definition have to be fueled by low carbon intensity energy, which means much more megawatts, which means much more demand for components and services and such. A few other mechanisms here, including the policy environment ones, so consistent implementation and then review of policy, IRP and energy resource plan, and then things that can be done with timing of bid windows and ministerial determination. So seeing a set of bid windows up front, and seeing smoothing of the timing of those over the years in IRP. These are things that can add to market certainty. Here, quickly just hone in also, what are the different models you could be using and how would they address some of these risks? So we talked about time, for example. Certification is another key one. If you're going to be breaking into the supply chain of a major global value chain player, you're going to have to be complying with certification requirements that are naturally the part of due diligence of finance. And there's certain models that make that easier versus trying to start from scratch with your own IP. So if you're setting up as a local manufacturing partnership, for example, or you take the approach that STI Norland took, there the certification is in place and you're working on the back of that, so you don't have to start from scratch. Toll manufacturing, quick way to get to market, and then the various models here show different approaches and different ways in which you could then integrate your local South African ownership and your black ownership. The summary really here, like you saw, we've got a bunch of possible areas of focus, each one many possible levers. We honed in on one. I'm going to leave the space open here for what comes up in Q&A, but in summary, we've shown that there's a clear opportunity. Scale may be debated, but its scale is material enough. And seen from many stakeholders' perspective, to secure this opportunity is actually part and parcel of enabling the future growth in capacity. So it's seen as part of a just transition to see how much we can secure of that, alongside the other parts of the value chain and the other spin-offs of having renewable energy coming online. So we've listed some of the opportunities, the challenges and enablers, or their categories. There's going to need to be a pulling together from multiple stakeholders, and often we turn to government to say, you've got to do this or you've got to do that, and all the solutions are in policy. I'm not convinced that is the only way, and we will hear from some industry players presently how they're finding ways to make it work and make contributions and open up the value chain. It's going to have to be a collaborative effort with influence from all sides. So I think here, hopefully within time, I will close, hand back to you, Chair, and be open for questions.
Thank you so much, Francis, for such an informative presentation. Of course, if there are questions directed to us, Francis, please post them on the Q&A. We will address this at the end of the session. Thanks, Francis. Our next presentation, we're going to look at local manufacturing opportunities in the wind energy value chain. Our next speaker is Angelina Mohan-Persad. Angelina has a diversified experience in a variety of industries, including renewables, mining, construction, and financial services. She was the second female at BHP Billiton globally in 2005 to have been accredited as a black belt specialist applying Six Sigma principles towards operational excellence. Her current activities at Goldwind are focused on a renewable energy sector where she is involved in developing strategy and implementation of overall management and economic development activities throughout the wind farm scope of work in the EPC as well as O&M phase of project development. So over to you, Angelina. We look forward to hearing from you on localization opportunities in the wind energy value chain.
Thank you very much, Untitled and SAWEA, for giving Goldwyn the opportunity to showcase our value chain in terms of local manufacturing opportunities. If we can get to the, can I control the slide? Okay, super. Just very quickly, I want to talk about who we are as Goldwyn. Internationally, we've got 73 gigawatts contracted capacity, and outside China, we've got 7 gigawatts. Outside China, we've installed 4,500 megawatts of installed capacity. So we are the largest turbine supplier in China and the second largest turbine supplier globally. As you can see on this chart, we've got 8 regional business centers, of which one is in Africa, in South Africa. It's stationed in South Africa, Goldwyn Africa, which I am part of. And we operate in 6 continents across 29 countries. Our footprint in South Africa started in the bid window round 4, where we were awarded 2 contracts for the Golden Valley and Excelsior contracts, and that is where we started our footprint in the renewable energy in South Africa. We're currently in operational phase for these 2 projects. So what I am going to talk today about, if we can get to the next slide, is I'm going to showcase, I'm going to highlight what our strategic plan is for the bid window 5 project and the projects going forward, our Goldwyn strategic part for Africa region, and what does that translate for the South African manufacturing sector and for the South African suppliers in our supply chain. In Africa, our core business is EPC and TSI scope, where we supply our turbines. And because it is our turbines, we also get involved in the maintenance scope of operations, where we do anything from 5 to 20-year operation scope of work. And we're also looking at opportunities in self-generation and microgrid in non-traditional IPP industries and factories, etc. But our core business is around EPC and TSI in IPPs for the bid window rounds. Our success factors for creating market share in South Africa will focus on customized solutions. How can we have competitive levelized cost of energy, addressing local content key, long-term commitment in terms of good delivery, as well as flexible customized solutions in the non-IPP sector. So when we look at our key targets for 2021 to 2025, to increase our market share, we need to have a consistent order book. And to have an order book, we have to have a competitive action plan. So what does that mean for us regionally? It means that we have to have continuous improvement in our technology. As you can see, well, in our current bid window, we are using an advanced technology compared to our previous round technology that we presented to the market. So we have to continually improve our technology, and we have a very robust R&D section that focuses on innovation. We also, in terms of continuous improvement, have to focus on our construction and service capabilities because we are EPC and TSI scope providers. We have to ensure that our construction and service capabilities are continually improving to meet the market demands of South Africa, and we have to have a very robust value chain. So if we can get to the next slide, I quickly want to talk about the next slide, please. I want to talk about what makes a value chain, and I'm going to use an example of a local manufacturing company. So this company was awarded contract for our Golden Valley and Excelsior projects in bid window 5. This is a company that is 51% Black owned. It is a company that is 25% Black women owned, and it is a company that is less than 100 million rand turnover a year. Now, this company approached Goldwyn in 2016, before we even started our projects for round 4. They approached us, and we signed an NDA with them, and their approach was offering us anchor cages. And they said to us, in offering the anchor cages, what we can manufacture locally will be the anchor plates. So we provided our technical specifications to them. Over a 1-year period, we did a due diligence exercise with them. There were product testing done in Beijing. And what made this company successful in terms of getting the opportunity with Goldwyn for manufacturing locally and for supplying the anchor cages was they were very proactive. Even though the round four projects took a long period to be awarded, they were proactive during the waiting period by engaging Goldwing continually. In the waiting period, they did testing to and fro between their offices and our Beijing testing offices. They were persistent. They took risks by sending their products at their own cost to our offices in China, to the research and development and technical team for testing. They showed commitment and they were supplier ready to deliver when we needed the capacity. So this was the success story of this company that has gotten into our bid window 5 value chain. They were robust, they were ready in round 4, and when we started our bid window 5 review, they had already approached us and they had much more local manufacturing component projects on their value chain. So we can get to the next slide. Next slide, please. Can we get to the next slide? Can we get to the next slide?
I'm not sure if we have lost Angelina. We were struggling to hear her. I think her connection is not very good. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes to allow her to get back in.
I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay, welcome back. You can continue.
Okay. So, thank you. Sorry, can we get to the next slide? Thank you. Sorry about that. So that was that company. The previous slide. Sorry. Yeah. So that company has now come on board into the value chain for the current bid window rounds. And why I showcase that company is to highlight to you that the local businesses need to be proactive, they need to be supplier ready, and they need to show commitment. And it is in that you are able to collaborate with the OEMs in order to find solutions for local manufacturing. So for bid window 5, what does our supply chain look like, and who is our value chain? As Goldwyn, we are the turbine supplier, and we are the EPC contractor, and we are the service operations company. And these are our value chain: the electrical balance of plant, the construction balance of plant, our transport crane and installation, the tower manufacturer, and we are going to be using local manufactured towers. So here's an opportunity for local businesses. If you have any specialized manufacturing capabilities that can support our concrete tower manufacturing, then you need to make contact with us. We have engineering consultants that are in South African, ED services, legal security services, and some small companies that we use around the wind farm that we support in terms of local community businesses. These are our supply chain. And so for bid window 5, we are saying that we need these suppliers to come on board and to share the same value chain or the values as Goldwyn in terms of continuous improvement to deliver the market demand that we need to deliver for the bid window rounds. If we need to have a competitive action plan, you need to make the contact with us, and we need to respect the terms of engagement. So I'm suggesting that if any businesses are working or have scope offerings and deliverables in this supply chain, they need to make contact with us, because we will then redirect them to the electrical balance of plant companies that we engage in terms of what they can offer for manufacturing the components within the electrical, within the construction, within the transport, crane and installation, etc. But what I can say is, in terms of when we review what occurred in round 4, in terms of building our value chain, we need to have we need to work together in unity. What we pick up is that as an EPC contractor, our supply chain separates their scope of work and from a team effort as not being part of the EPC contractor. So there's a divide when it comes to deliverables. And I plea with the South African market that if you are interested in wanting to work with Goldwind, you need to understand that even though you are part of these subcomponents, you are one team with the EPC contractor. You need to know your product. You need to have that one team mindset. You need to be proactive. You need to show commitment. You need to have integrity in the way you do business. And you need to know your product. And most importantly, what we're learning from our previous projects is that understand that when you get into wanting to do business with international companies, you need to know that this company gives you the opportunity to brand your company for future, and therefore your credibility is important. And if you honor and respect the heads of terms in your contract and not burn your bridges, you will definitely be able to collaborate for future projects. As an example, I'm using the small business in terms of the anchor cages. That company maintained the respect of the terms of engagement. They showed commitment. They were proactive. They were on the same team as Goldwind. And we were very happy to engage them for bid window 5 because they honored the relationship in the activity and in the contract. Whereas some other contractors, big businesses in South Africa, did not respect the terms of engagement and burnt many bridges. So importantly, as we understand that this is a growing market and you want to grow your capabilities, learn to respect the OEMs and understand that you are on one team with them and work towards building your credibility rather than burning your bridges. And what happens is they are very, I've worked now for 2 international companies that offer these kind of scope of work. And they are very polite and they're very willing to want to assist the local industry to want to get and meet the capabilities of international standards. But with that comes respect for the relationship and appreciation for the capabilities that can be transferred through the process of skills transfer and local manufacturing collaboration. If we can get to the next slide, what does this robust value chain mean for South Africa? Again, using the small business that we that delivered our value chain in terms of anchor cages, there's credibility. They have credibility because they worked well with Goldwind, and that credibility gives them the opportunity to collaborate with Goldwind in the next bidding rounds and the future bidding rounds. And that also gives them an opportunity to build their standard of products, to be able to create a manufacturing confidence to offer their products to the rest of Africa. So if you want to work, my advice to the local supply chain in South Africa, if you want to be a value chain with the OEMs, build your credibility, work alongside them, work with an intention of collaboration so that you can have the market confidence you need in order to be able to provide your market, your products across the African continent. I mean, I think about a couple years ago when we sat with the DTIC, when we sat with the DTIC and we spoke about what can we offer locally, their demand was, we want this product to be able to be offered to the rest of the African continent. So we're saying we as OEMs are willing to collaborate and work with the local market to be able to ensure that they have the capacity to be to have a manufacturing confidence to offer the rest of the African continent. But with that comes a respect for the relationship and to be able to show commitment and do your part. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelina. Very insightful, and definitely you've shared a lot of advice for aspiring local manufacturers. And I hope people are taking notes, because as we move into this back-to-back bid windows, you need to start strongly engaging with the OEMs. And I think this is a great opportunity for an OEM to explain how do they do business with local supply chain. And speaking of local supply chain, we have a case study for wind energy components, which is going to be presented by Valentino Adams. Valentino is a director at CS Renewables. They specialize in manufacturing of wind turbine internals and steel or mechanical work for the solar industry. Valentino has 20 years experience in manufacturing of steel and in the transformer industry, and has worked for 6 years for Resolux Africa in the wind energy in South Africa. And his goal is to be one of the leading suppliers in the wind and solar industry by supplying full kits with very competitive pricing and quality. So we want to put to the test what Angelina has said in terms of engaging with the OEMs, and Valentino is going to give us a practical case study of, is that really the case? This is how we interact with the OEMs. So without further ado, over to you, Valentino.
Thanks, Natombi. I just want to say to Angelina, I really enjoyed the presentation. I think it was very effective. And especially when it comes to local manufacturing, you know, I think we need to up our standard. And I've been around now for, I think, about 8 years in the renewable energy. And personally, my opinion is that I've found that a lot of local suppliers, they haven't taken to I would say they're not serious about the renewable energy, which is quite sad. From my side, you know, as a kit supplier, or going forward want to be a kit supplier, I think, yeah, we need to, especially supplying OEMs and from Europe, and with the technology in the wind and the solar industry coming to South Africa, yeah, I think we need to up our game to become world-class. And if we want to export, and that is my goal as a local supplier. So thanks, Natombi. So I started out at Resolux, and then about a year ago, Resolux decided to leave South Africa, and then I started CS Renewables, and I'm based in Atlantis, close to GRI. So yeah, my whole aim is to supply the industry with full kits, and obviously to supply the solar with the frames on the panels. So I think my whole aim is to really it's built around the skills and development. It's you know, when we deliver product, is that we deliver product of compared to the European standards, and obviously at a very competitive price. I think we've come into the renewable energy we haven't seen that smooth sail yet, but I believe we come there, especially with bid window 5, and that is going to create a lot of opportunities. And so on my case study, I've just looked at the whole thing, and I've decided, you know what, I'm going to be very positive. I think because there's a lot of negativity, especially around renewable energy, but I think there's a lot of opportunity, and there can be a lot of growth, especially in the small sector and the medium sector of businesses for renewable energy. So can we, the assurance of having renewable energy that it creates jobs and skill. And I think with South Africa, the transition going to renewable energy is the opportunity for a lot of people, especially in the the small areas, the small businesses. I think we still got a lot to learn. We still got a lot to grow. And I think we still need a lot of things to be put in place for us to go to the next level, and especially to supply these big OEMs to our full capacity. Can I have the next slide, please? So in the renewable energy, this provides opportunity for the country to decarbonize the electricity sector, new opportunities for coal employees and job seekers. So, you know, when we move away from coal, I think most countries now are starting to move away from coal and going into renewable energy. But the great thing about renewable energy, it creates just more and more jobs. So between 2020 and 2050, regardless of shift of the power generation, there will be a decline of 30 to 40% based off employment. But that employment will be definitely redirected to the renewable energy. Can we move to the next slide? Yeah, so you can see with the renewable energy, there will definitely be a upsurge in job creation, because I think currently in South Africa, that is a big concern, that losing the focus on the coal sector, that there will be a lot of job losses and everything. But if you look at worldwide, you know, the job creation, especially in the renewable energy, is on the upsurge. So by increasing the share of renewable energy, employment can be expected to increase by about 40% by 2030. And I think it will be more. Jobs in the renewable energy through the services, construction, and the manufacturing aspects will have created, which results in employment opportunities in almost all sectors, including the mining sector. There will still be an increase in employment despite job losses in the coal mining. Can we have the next slide? Thank you. So then you know, with the, especially in our line of work, with the kits and the stuff that we want to supply, and with the lights and the fittings, we have the steel mills, we have the aluminum mills, the laser cutting machines, the high-def plasma for our thicker, especially what GRIs do, the steel towers. We have the cable manufacturing in Port Elizabeth, Aberdare cables. We have the ladder manufacturing, the lights manufacturing factories, and even the hot galvanizing. So basically we have the infrastructure, but I think with the demand in the renewable energy sector, a lot of these factories, they need to change the way of doing business. And I think those are the things that Angelina just mentioned, you know, where they have to change their attitude towards the manufacturing sector, because a lot of companies, some or another way, they've lost faith. And by doing so, when it comes to quotes and it comes to the infrastructure, a lot of them is very slow to turn, you know, because I think in the renewable energy, especially if I look at the kitchen, if I look at the skills and stuff that we need there, a lot of these, although we have the infrastructure available, a lot of our factories have to comply with what's the need for the renewable energy. So my personal opinion is that our factories in South Africa, they need to become more serious, I think, and need to change their mindset around renewable energy. Can we have the next slide? So I think localization is using the local infrastructure that we have that creates jobs to upskill local people in South Africa. By localizing the wind and solar industry, will take a positive steps by OEMs to give the local industry time and full support to create a solid infrastructure in the manufacturing process of supply to these two mega industries in South Africa. And if I just look at that And just what Angelina mentioned is that, yeah, we have to be more confident. We have to be more assured, especially when it comes to renewable energy. And then the implementation of strong policy measures will result in the upward trend of job creation and a strong wind and solar manufacturing industry. In the next slide, we'll find a graph of the growth in the wind energy from 2019 to 2030 and see the positive increase. And that is globally. So if we look globally, beside the bid window 5, if we look at globally, what is going to be installed till 2030, we can actually see that there's a very positive growth forecast for renewable energy, and especially in the wind sector. So personally, I think our local manufacturers, you know, need to change the view of thinking, especially when it comes to local content and local supply and local manufacturing, because if you look at worldwide, the world is changing. I mean, the world is moving away from coal, and definitely, I think there's a lot of people is putting a lot of money, infrastructure in renewable, obviously with wind and solar. So I think South Africa should have the same view, being new in the game. I mean, not too new, but starting in 2011. I think, yeah, especially on the manufacturing side, yeah, we need to change our view and change our stance to the supply for the wind turbine industry by, I think, by upping our game, and especially on the quality side. And if you want to be a market leader and a universal supplier to this industry, yeah, I think we need to become much more professional in our approach. Can I have the next slide? And then this is just the job creation in the renewable sector. And we can see from 2009 to 2019, it's grown steadily, you know, but the good news is there is growth, especially in job creation. So that should give us a lot of confidence for South Africa, that with the growing market for renewable energy, there's going to be a lot of job creation. I mean, there's going to be a lot of new factories that can open, and it will lead to other things. And beside the job creation, there's a lot of, I would say, dead townships, you know, that will come to life because of renewable energy, because of the new farms that's going up, because of the new wind farms, solar farms that's going up. So there's a lot of things for us to get excited about, especially in the manufacturing sector. Can I have the next slide? So the long-term effect of manufacturing is continuous job creation, decarbonizing, increase in local economic wealth through less imports. And I think that is what we need for our local market, you know, to have less imports and to up our own factories. But by doing so, we need to be, I think, we need to be more serious, especially in the supply chain and the skills and continuous development. You know, we need to put more money into that to show the OEMs, to show the tower manufacturers that, you know, we as local businesses in SA, we can do it. Because by doing so, I mean, we just will create more jobs, new businesses, our infrastructure. And then obviously the last point here is that it will have a positive impact in communities, especially where these farms and these solar farms will go up. So my closing point is that especially those that are in the manufacturing chain, value chain, especially in South Africa, you know, let's become more serious. Let's up our game and to become worldwide, not just to think of the local economy, but to export as well, because, you know, if we up our game, I think there's a lot of room for export, especially into Africa from South Africa. Thanks.
Thank you, Valentino. Thank you so much. I like the emphasis on job creation, because no economy has ever been able to increase its job creation numbers exponentially without localizing manufacturing and establishing local manufacturing facilities. Questions for Valentino can be posted in the Q&A as we move on with the program for today. We are now going to hear, we've heard from the wind examples, wind OEM, Goldwind, and Valentino supplying components locally to the wind and solar sector. We're now going to hear from local manufacturing opportunities in the solar PV value chain. And our next presenter is Conrad Harmse from DEN Africa. Conrad is currently a business development manager for renewables at DEN Africa. He's an experienced BDM in the renewables and energy sector for over 25 years. He specializes in planning and overseeing of new opportunities in the sector, with a strong technical aptitude to collaborate with design teams to ensure standards and specifications are met. Being involved with specialization and coordination of well over 900 megawatts of renewable energy projects in South Africa, he also obtained a Mercury International SEP program in sales. So you can see that we are going to get a wealth of information from someone who's been involved in the sector for a number of years. So look forward to hearing from you, Conrad. Over to you. Conrad, you're on mute. Conrad, you're on mute.
Sorry, I had the glitch there. I kept on pressing it. I didn't want to switch over. Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
I just want to commend Valentina and Angelina for the amount of work that they've put in the wind sector. I think us as a PV community can learn a lot, and we are far behind when it comes to local manufacturing. And I think today we'll speak a little bit about that and what we can address and what's the stumbling blocks and what's the pros and cons going forward. So I'll give you some of my insights, what I think what we as an industry can do and how we can collaborate with local manufacturers and look to a positive path forward. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so it's identifying the solar plant opportunities. First of all, I've broken it down in a couple of sections. Solar PV modules. There's currently only one local manufacturer in South Africa capable of producing about 300 megawatts worth of panels per year, which is Art Solar. There's a couple of tier one international players locally that's also present, Jinko Solar, Canadian Solar, and all those guys. But I doubt if they'll ever invest locally, and we need to find different ways of accompanying their product. That could be through frames for the PV modules. If you look at Helium, they manufacture frame modules. And if you look at Valentino, I mean, that's a scope where you can look into. These players might be in a position to consider manufacturing locally under license with local partnerships in the near future. The reason for me saying that is that why these companies I'm highly doubtful if they invest locally is that I think that our awarding of projects between rounds is a bit staggered. And I think that's something we need to look at, but we'll discuss that a bit later. Then the tracker structures. There is local presence in tracker manufacturing in South Africa. Companies like STI Nordland is a good example of that, because they are a multinational company that invested in South Africa through partnerships and manufacturing a lot of these components locally now. We have the the capacity as a country to invest more in local manufacturing in the space with the likes of Max Steel, the big players. Steel supplies currently is constrained all over the world, and we as a country will experience the same. The maintenance and repairs of these tracker gearboxes and motors is currently being done in South Africa and in Cape Town, by the way. Can we go to the next slide, please? Then DC combiner boxes. The local assembly of combiner boxes is currently well represented. There is, however, more scope with regards to implementation of local products into these boxes. Some of these boxes are manufactured locally. The context of these boxes are, however, still supplied via international companies. Component manufacturing under license could be established with international players. And I refer to surge protection. It could be circuit breakers. It could be terminal blocks within these boxes. I mean, we as a country have the capacity to do all the above with the expertise that we've got in this country. Then the inverters. International players like Sungrow, ABB, and Hawaii will continue their domination of the inverter market. It will be highly unlikely that they will invest in local manufacture, but we have the expertise and knowledge to establish a local product. We can work with the likes of the CSIR to develop something locally that's done for South Africa. A lot of these companies, they're made overseas in Europe and in China, and they come to South Africa, and our harsh conditions means that some of these technologies needs to be adapted, and that adaptation costs money for the OEMs at the end of the day. The DC cabling, that's on the DC side of the PV plants. There is no company in South Africa that manufactures DC cabling, not at all, according to IEC standards. It could change in the near future, but because of the demand for these cables will increase with the generation cap being lifted to 100 megawatts. These can be manufactured under license with existing cable manufacturers globally. What I mean by that is, we do have cable companies in South Africa that do have the capability to manufacture this. They just don't have the technology. So what we can do is we can do that under license in South Africa through international multinationals. Can we go to the next slide, please? The AC cables. The AC cables of AC cables manufacturing in South Africa is well established. There are big players in the market present with the likes of Aberdare, CBI, African Cables. International players somehow still manage to supply into the local market. There's two reasons for this. It's price and availability. To overcome this, we need to ensure that local standards applies, i.e. SAN standards. Another thing with the availability is coming back to Valentina's problem. Local manufacturing doesn't seem to take the energy market serious at the moment. And sometimes availability is not present. And that's why these goods gets imported from overseas. The constraints that we have going forward, government needs to put policy in place to speed up license and permit allocation for private generation. Eskom needs to ensure that wheeling of power from independent private generation projects are made possible. Government needs to speed up the IPP program. Eskom needs to ensure grid backbone is able to accommodate these renewable projects. Next slide, please. So what does the future look like for local manufacturing? More projects will encourage investment from local and international players. More projects will sustain investment and establishment of new companies locally. More demand for products in the solar PV market will in turn sustain these new and exciting companies. More companies will ensure a bigger distribution network, which in turn means more employment. More companies will ensure more employment and sustain growth for the economy. More companies will ensure competitive pricing and encourage export markets for the solar PV. If we can become a big player manufacturing globally, I cannot see why we can't export our expertise into the rest of the world. My company currently does engineering work for one of the biggest players in the renewable PV sector in the world. And we do all the engineering and design for the whole world from South Africa. They're a team of 12 highly experienced engineers. I want to thank you for your time. And all I wanted to say is, let's take this by the horns and let's tackle it and let's grow this industry further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Conrad. Thank you so much. I think you've broken it down very nicely, all the components in the solar PV value chain that have the potential to be manufactured locally. Please have a look at the Q&A. There are some questions for you, so you can prepare to answer those in there. Our last presentation for the day, I think also very important, because we can't talk about establishing local businesses without talking about the money part. Where is the financing going to come from? So our development finance institution, IDC, is with us today to give us a presentation on renewable energy localization strategy and financing local manufacturing. A presentation is going to be given by Mukesh Ramji from IDC. He is a business development manager in the machinery, equipment, and electronics strategic business unit at the IDC. Has a master's degree in business leadership and has had several strategic and specialist roles within the organization. He is currently part of the Renewable Energy Localization Strategy Action Plan with the IDC, with the aim of driving the local content agenda in the economic and sustainable manner. We look forward to hearing from you, Mukesh, and what financing mechanisms are available for local businesses in the IDC. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tommy. I hope you've given me control so I could put forward my presentation. Can everyone see it?
Not yet. You are the host. Now it's going to your screen. Yes.
Can you all see it?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. I think first, from the other speakers, we've heard from Goldwind, CS Renewables, from the PV side, Lumex Energy. So I'm hoping today that I will highlight where the Industrial Development Corporation fits in, how we support the renewable energy sector, and where the opportunities lies. And once you've understood the opportunities, how do we bring the funding on board? And then hope that funding will also be an enabler to bring in competitiveness in the marketplace for our product to be showcased into SADC and the rest of the continent. So if you see my screen here, I fall within the machinery and equipment electronics unit. That's where the manufacturing sector takes place. We have infrastructure, we'll focus on your EPCs. And then you've got your energy sector that will look at energy generations sector itself. Yeah. What's our key goals from our side is basically import replacement as far as we can. You cannot replace everything, but the idea is to see how you could maximize on that. But that comes also with the economies of scale and consistency with regard to market and certainty. Localization to extend through your value chain itself and export to the rest of the continent itself. My sector, basically, we focus on the mining, quarry, construction sector, manufacture of lifting and handling equipments like your cranes, elevators. And in your mining quarry sectors, basically, we look at equipments for washing, screening, grinding, and for minerals itself. The other sector that we look at is your pumps, valves, and instrumentations. And one looks at your different pumps, valves, and this could also be linked up to your hydrogen sector itself. And this is where we basically fall in. Sorry, I'm just going to go back there. This is where power and renewables, be it your PVs, your turbines, your solar panels, whatever is linked to power generation, distribution, or any components around that will fall within this cluster itself. We also have the electronics sector, which looks at your manufacture and assembly of electronic equipment, be it industrial, consumer, automotive, data processing electronics, and wireless electronics itself. So let's unpack from a PV perspective as to how we view the PV industry itself. And we've seen that the PV industry has grown on average by 28.8%. And that has grown from 137.6 gigawatts in 2013 to 223.2 gigawatts in 2019. And this was further propelled by the decreasing in technology prices itself, which we all have seen. Your modules, China dominates it from a production perspective. I mean, it's increased to about 140 gigawatts in 2019. Of that, 98.6 gigawatts contribution is from China. The rest is followed by South Korea, Malaysia, Japan, Germany, the US. We see International Renewable Energies Energy Association outlook for solar PV. It's expected that capacity will grow sixfold by 2030 compared to the 2018 levels. IDC itself, we funded a range of utility scale to smaller scale distribution energy solutions, either owned or used for commercial, industrial sectors. As part of our funding, we look at supporting Black empowered, youth empowered companies to own and operate renewable energies. Our investments basically to date in the renewable energy sector has been about 14 billion. We have also funded community trust, enabling community participation in the renewable energies and in the REEF program itself. 2019, I think that will be a good platform to further grow the local manufacturing capacity itself. We anticipate a further 400 billion that will be invested in the renewable energy sector to realize the integrated resource plan targets of 2030. And this translates to 68 billion that will be invested in the South African private sector itself. Further area, we look at the rest of Africa, projected to reach about 142 gigawatts in 2030, equating to about 2 trillion of additional investment required. Where's our focus areas in SADC? These are the countries we're basically looking at. And the rest of the continent, these are the countries, our focus areas. But if there are any other countries that come in, with viable solutions, we're willing to support them. And it's also to look at the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement in support of that itself. So our localization methodology, how do we look at potential for localization, how it was assessed? We look at 3 criteria. Is there adequate end demand of the product? The extent of global competitiveness. I think this was highlighted by many of the speakers itself. We have to be competitive. It just cannot be to support the South African market and supply of localized components into this value chain. I think Goldwind has highlighted that as well. Let's be proactive, understand what you want to do and start engaging with the EPC contractors to see how you could complement their final product itself. And then timing and readiness. And this is always a deliberation. I think it was covered by our initial speaker. Invest when you win, or invest based on market certainty. And based on market certainty, with the uncertainty with the rollout of the bid windows, we've seen the downside of it of companies mothballing as well. So your solar panels, from the opportunity perspective, this is basically the breakdown of it. Your silicon cell, lamination, aluminium frames was covered by CS Renewables. Your glass, you get your different components or your key components around your inverters, your mounting structure, steel, aluminium clamps, and cabling, installation armor, and conductors, right? We've also seen photovoltaic panels, your components. If we look at a 1 megawatt silicon base, we look at it, about 70 tons of glass that goes in, 56 tons of steel, concrete 47 tons, 19 tons of aluminium, silicon 7 tons, copper 7 tons, and plastics about 6 tons. And that all goes in. And these ultimately is also key with the input raw material that goes in. So localization potential, we look at, the silicon cell, highly competitive industry. The IGA used to partner with tier 1 companies that has the certification. Localization potential is medium to high. Aluminium frames is high. We've got the likes of Hulamin. There's many other aluminium manufacturing companies that they are there. Your superstrate glass, that's a bit low due to you need the economies of scale. We're uncompetitive there. And also due to the high iron content and silicon that will require around us to produce the low iron solar glass. This is primarily imported. We looked at your EVA. We've highlighted that there's a low potential there. Your backing sheets are low. It's concentrated supply chain, limiting opportunities for local manufacturing, primarily imported. Wiring, local copper, uncompetitive. But if you've got the economies of scale, you've got the quality, there could be an opportunity. Your junction boxes, small scale, but requires about 300 megawatts a year of demand to justify the investment. We looked at that as medium itself. Your inverters, I think there's opportunity there for localization. We view that as high. To partner with a international company, there's also a lot of local capabilities here. And I think that could be a key area as well. Your power stage, power electronics, a quality issue, it's limited to local manufacturing and semiconductor equipment. 70% is currently imported. You got your enclosure and packages, that's also low. Your printed circuit boards, medium, that could be an opportunity itself for local suppliers can compete competitively on the international prices and labor costs. Assembly, production, and testing, most manufacturers already source that locally. Okay, you got your mounting structure. I think the steel we talked is high. Your aluminium profile is high. Your clamps, nuts, and bulbs low. Assembly, production, and testing is low. Cabling itself, your conductor rods, aluminium rods, there's a high potential there. Insulation high, armor steel high. DC cable connectors, it's medium. It's highly specialized components, depends on the design, qualities, designs for free assembly and tool free. So assembly, production, and testing is also low itself. We look at battery storage. Battery storage predominantly is imported from China, your lithium iron ore, phosphate prismatic cells. But many companies have their own management support systems around that, and there could be opportunities around on the assembly side. But there's also, there is the downstream level on the mineral beneficiation side where opportunities could lie. On the wind side, we've seen that the installed capacity that was launched of 1.6 gigawatts bidding process, which was launched in March 2021. We look at the full 2019, it's a significant installed capacity by 2030 that's required, 11.4 megawatts. Due to the local requirement, obviously, there's a drive to push local content in this because we need to sustain our local companies itself. There's a lot of opportunities on the construction, development, transportation, operation, and maintenance side. But where's the local production for, for wind turbines? Has Jerry made a great progress? Due to its bulky nature, towers are generally manufactured locally itself. So we see the blades, due to the high quality and designs requirements, are manufactured by a handful of dominant players. It's highly capable first-tier global suppliers, and that would require sustained domestic export demand. It would need to be part of an OEM strategy to subcontract them to local firms to access the local and the rest of the continent, because ultimately the investment and the capex that's put into these plants needs to be sustainable post 2030. While your nacelle components, your gearboxes, bearing, generators, I mean, there's about 8,000 components in the standard turbine, and many of these OEMs have their own network of suppliers. I think local manufacturers can position themselves to capture that slice. I think it was highlighted by Goldwing as well. One needs to be proactive, understand it, and see how you could be part of that value chain itself. Because ultimately, apart from supporting them here locally, the idea is to get into their global value chain for long-term sustainability. Nacelles and in-house, many OEMs look at retaining in-house control over the development and production, but this could change with long-term opportunities could emerge where it could be assembled here. If one looks at the market itself, SELEC, I think sub-Saharan Africa is 43% of the population having access to energy demand, and Africa will grow significantly over the next decade to support the high projected growth of the economy. And if we look at Africa itself, there's a potential of 180,000 terawatt hours per annum, and that's enough to satisfy the continent's electricity needs about 250 times over. So with that opportunity, you need funding. And how does this funding come in? What does the IDC do? How do we fund? So predominantly, we look at your debt funding, equity, quasi-equity funding, guarantees, trade financing. There is security that's required that will relate from from specific circumstances and on an individual case-by-case basis. Compliance with international environmental standards. Shareholder and owners have to provide some sort of contribution, and that's basically the contribution of historically disadvantaged people may be lowered, in which case the corporation is prepared to extend finance in excess of the owner's contribution. We look at sustainability, and I think this is very key for us, because it just cannot be for a duration, a short-term period, because there's people that's employed. We need to ensure that the jobs are sustainable sustainable throughout the manufacturing process itself. We do not refinance. We look at Black economic empowerment, women empowerment, youth, and Black industrialists itself. With COVID coming in, I think it was highlighted in the introduction that we've seen, supply chains being impacted. The current challenges we're experiencing now as well. We have provided funding to support distressed companies. These companies that are unable to fund its operating activities within the next 6 months. This is not open-ended. One needs to show an 18 to 36-month period as to how you'll turn that around. We basically look at, we can support from a working capital perspective, what your equipment requirement is. If you're not a level 4B company, you need to show that there's within 24 months that there is a plan. The idea is to export, ability to export, and also to be competitive itself. Our funding for that is limited to 30 million. Your pricing, a fixed rate of 0% for the first 18 months, and a fixed rate of 2.5% per annum moving forward. As you can see, this is quite competitive funding. It's based on 80% of our funding, 20% will be of our balance sheet that we use. We look at 60-month basis. We also provide a 50% grant to support companies' intervention where training is required. And this will not be exceeded by 1 million rand itself. What other funding we have? I'm going to go quickly through the funding that we have. We have the SANREF funding. It's a 1 billion rand fund size. It's also to support renewable energy. We look at each one on a case-by-case basis. Our funding basically is looking at a prime plus 1.5% or equivalent fixed rate. It's limited to 250 million per project, and minimum investment period is 3 years. We have a special Grow E scheme. This is basically to encourage youth. Youth sharing should be at least about 26%. A cost of job about 750,000 per duration of that. Our funding around that, we've got 26% of youth own. It's prime less 2% or equity 6% RET IRR. More than 50% youth own, prime less 3% or equity 5% RET IRR. As you can see, this is to encourage more youth ownership in our initiative of industrialization. We have a MSAP funding. Once you're out of distress, you need working capital. This is also, our funding is limited to 30 million. It's a fixed rate of 2.5% for a 48-month period. That includes the moratoriums itself. We have for plant and equipment, it's the same thing. It's 30 million, fixed rate of 2.5%, and it's over 84-month period itself. We have a UIF scheme as well. This is to create jobs, sustainable jobs over the period. We have our qualifying criteria of 0.8 jobs per every 1 million. And our funding basically ranges between 6.11 to 8.61%. That will be our range. And if there is basically what your BI states is, the job creation, the youth development, women participation, there will be a discount on that pricing that's basically provided itself. The downstream industry competitive fund, that's to support the steel industry, as you know, with regard to wind. I mean, if you're going with your towers, your frames, there's a lot of steel that's required. It's intensive. We basically have a downstream competitive fund that's available, and that's basically to support. It will be IDC risk pricing, less 2% for enterprises with an annual turnover of 123.5 million, and 1.5% for annual turnover of greater than 123.5 million. So basically, it's to support the downstream industry to become competitive. We have SMEs and mid-cap funding. This is to assist companies access loan financing for CapEx, medium to long-term funding itself. And this is based on our normal IDC risk pricing, less 2%, and a maximum of 12 million euros that we currently have. So in summary, we basically want to support businesses that exhibit economic merit in terms of profitability, sustainability, governance, and environmental compliance. We want to support your broad-based expansionary Black economic empowerment and Black industrialists, support to our client support and growth division. And our team basically want to see a competitive, diversified, local manufacturing capital equipment industry that satisfies a significant portion of demand locally and the rest of Africa and can compete globally. So that's my presentation for today. I'm going to stop sharing. Just hope I haven't gone over my time limit.
No, not at all.
I know it was quite a bit that I put forward, but I think, one needs to understand that there is opportunities. The IDC has provided competitive funding, and that's hopefully that will enable the competitiveness of the product that's going out. And, and to end on this, basically, you know, there's a good quote by James Cameron that says, "A nation that leads in renewable energies will be the nation that leads the world." So perhaps this could be a basis, you know, a new start, and hopefully we could get our employment in and get the localization and support the industry where we can. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
Thank you very much, Mukesh. Like that quote. And of course, green economic recovery is something that's going to help us to build our economy. Thanks for sharing what the IDC is doing. Sometimes we take it for granted that the public knows. I'm sure a lot of people attending here have benefited quite a lot from what you have presented. And of course, these presentations are going to be made available. Thank you so much to all the speakers for sticking to the time. I see we have quite a bit of time for the Q&A. Thank you for sharing your insights with our audience. My job for the day is done. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Nivesh Govender, who's the Chief Operations Officer at the South African PV Industry Association, to chair the Q&A session and take us through to conclusion of the session. Over to you, Nivesh.
Thank you very much, Ntombi. I'm going to disappoint you. Your job is not over. Please, can you stay on the panel to answer some questions as well? Marilise, please can I ask that we take down the presentation, and then the panelists, please can you switch on your videos so we can have a conversation. I see there's a lot of questions. Thank you to the panelists who have started answering those questions. So participants can just check those answers as they've received them. I also see there's a lot of requests for contact details. Just by a show of thumbs, please, presenters, can we get that you will be able to share your contact details with the participants? Just a thumbs up. Thank you, Angelina. Thank you, friends. Mukesh. Thank you, everybody. Great. And Tommy, please stay on and switch on your video because there's some questions I'd like to pose to you as well. Let's go through it, colleagues. Maybe starting with a policy question. So there is an anonymous attendee that says local manufacturers have left South Africa and there's no credibility regarding the market stability and there's no appetite for investment by international companies. I haven't seen this personally. I see that a lot of the international companies are looking at South Africa as an opportunity to invest. Again, a given bid window for bid window 5 and 6 and 7 being announced. So anyone wants to take this, I'm going to throw it out there. And Tommy, maybe you can kick us off because I'm sure you've got some views. Are you going to stay away from it? Good.
Not a one, I'll pass.
Sure. Mukesh, from you guys at IDC, are you guys seeing any trends with regards to international companies coming back to set up local manufacturing?
There is engagement with international OEMs looking at setting up. I think there's a lot of discussions. It all comes down to market certainty and the policy rollout. I think you had OEMs that have set up before, and based on the uncertainty of demand or the cycle of demand, it becomes very difficult for a company to continue, especially around a market itself. There are talks of engagement, but it all comes down to the long-term view of the OEM, how they view their market strategy, and I think most of them are looking beyond South Africa. So it's beyond the REEP program, and I think that's very important. That the dependency on REEP cannot only be the only criteria to set up here.
Good. Thank you. A very diplomatic answer. Thank you. Thank you, Mukesh.
If I can
Francis,
add to this, Nivesh, sorry.
Please, Angelina,
yes,
go.
Yes. So for the current round, we are looking at local manufacturing of concrete towers, So it is going to be 85% locally manufactured. And obviously, because we're unsure of the sustainability, we're going to have a mobile local manufacturing concrete tower manufacturing operation. So obviously, if we are satisfied with the longevity of the regular awards of good allocations, then the setup of an actual plant will be, in the country. But now we are manufacturing through a mobile concrete manufacturing firm in the country.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Nivash, maybe I
Yes.
take you up on that. On that, I
Go
just
for
want to
it.
say that I think the comment is very pessimistic. I think we've seen a lot of movement in the policy space, which gives a lot of confidence in terms of where we are going and where we are directed. We've got the IRP 2019, which maps out what should be proposed over the next 10 years. We've got the ministerial determination, and government on several occasions have announced procurement plans for bid window 7. And we've seen regulatory environment being eased up in favor of private sector procuring own power from IPPs and municipalities being able to do that. So I know that in the past we went through challenges with regards to market stability, but I think we are in a much better place now, and we need to utilize the opportunity to make sure that we maximize our localization potential.
Definitely, completely agree. Thank you, Nchombi. Moving on, I think, Francis, this question is for you. It's from Bhavin asking, how do you assess the best entry point for companies in testing, inspection, and certification? These companies cover a vast range of services in the renewable energy industry. Any thoughts would be appreciated of how you break in?
I will have a stab. I hear an echo, I'm not sure why. So I think this falls into, I've seen quite a few questions here about how do we access those who are doing procurement, and how do we access those who are available for procurement. There's quite a lot of questions that kind of relate to that. That's why I shared at least one resource that might be helpful there for some, which is that designated components list. If you look through the chat, there are many designated components under renewables. That's a first stab at such a database available to anyone. If you find there's missing elements there, missing suppliers, please let us know. So certification, CSR is being very active in filling this gap and working with the need. I would see if you could ping them and their testing certification project to get some insight. Otherwise, my sense is you need to speak to those who are looking to service the internationals. We talked a little bit about certification and your benefit for working as a licensed producer of an already certified product. If you're looking to try recertify or to service certification of a new product locally, you need to find those guys. So I don't have aside from the suggestion to reach out to CSR, their work they're doing to fill that gap. Follow whatever leads are shown through this conversation to reach the OEMs and the global value chain players who are looking to find local partners. I do identify that there's a gap in linking up the need with the supply. So
indeed,
set back.
Good, solid advice there, Francis. Thank you for that. Valentino, you covered job creation quite a bit, and attached to that is come skills. What are the training needs required for the renewable energy value chain from Ivan?
Yeah, I think on that side, sorry, my mic. Firstly, I think on the renewable energy, there should be a more urgency from government, to, especially with the rollout plan. Like we've gone now on training with Vestas, And obviously when you have the stop-start, you know, especially when it comes to placing orders, it's quite difficult. Yeah, especially on the training side. So we have had extensive training from Vestas, getting our quality and stuff together. GRI has assisted us as well, especially getting our quality act together to supply the industry. So we basically set up to do that, you know, but with everything, I think it's best to be practical. So, but unfortunately now it's a waiting game again, because obviously the lack of orders. So, yeah, it's a quite tricky one there. You know, like currently we, as a manufacturer, we quiet now because, you know, the market, there's no orders available, especially now with the emergency round and then with window 5, yeah.
Definitely. I think there is a lot of work happening around skills, scarce skills, manufacturing skills, with EWCETA and MERCETA leading the pack in trying to ascertain where the gaps are in skills, and then how do we cover those gaps. Conrad, you want to add?
Yeah, just from our side as then Africa, and being a multinational, obviously we offer free webinar training on our systems in the renewable space for lightning protection and earthing design. Obviously, we do a proper CPD course as well that's underwritten by our own professional engineers. Obviously, that comes at a cost, but we do that on a continuous basis. But the free training is there, and we can do that on a weekly basis for everybody that needs to and wants to attend.
Good. Thank you for that, Conrad. Franz, related but not so related, there's a question, there's a lot of thank yous for sharing your case study. So well done to you guys on that project. But there's a question around the engineering work. So the question goes, the engineering work done on the project is very mechanical or civil related. The person is just wondering what engineering work was done with respect to the actual panels themselves beyond the selection process.
Thank you. So just to clarify, we played a role at Lumax Energy on the mechanical and civil part of this project as mounting structure suppliers, and then that's why I focused so much on that part of the project. There was, of course, a lot of engineering that went into the panel, but this project was supplied by an international panel supplier, so that engineering was not a local matter.
Good. Thank you for that, Franz. There's a question about Centeno investing in manufacturing of inverters in South Africa. Conrad, this is positioned at you, but maybe I can answer. I do believe that Centeno is going to achieve over the 40% requirement as per the designation requirement. We have put out a statement on this. You can find it on the SAPVIA website as well. Franz, in terms of the payback period for your investment on the project, what is the envisioned payback period for the 134 million capital expenditure?
I'm unfortunately not qualified to answer that. I have to revert to Solar Africa, who did the financial engineering on this project. So we could probably get on, but I'm not qualified to answer that.
Good. Thank you for that, Franz. Mukesh, there's a couple of questions for you. The first one being, has there been any movement in terms of applications for funding in the wind manufacturing industry? And can you please provide a link for all those funding requirements that you presented?
Yes, I think there's a number of inquiries with regard to wind from, companies setting up the full value chain based on turbine assembly, blade manufacturing, as well as the tower manufacturing. So it all comes down to economic viability that comes through. So there is inquiries that do come through, and on the nacelles as well as the full turbine, certain key components as well. So there is inquiries that do appear. With regard to the funding that we have, I think that will be shared as to what we currently have, and you're also welcome to go onto our website or make contact with me directly, which I'll share my details with everyone.
Thank you very much. Another question, Mukesh, is the IDC working with the DTIC to ensure local downstream enterprise development?
I think, you know, the DTI and IDC, basically there's a black industrialist grant that's basically available. That's to ensure that black industrialization occurs. That helps us a lot, especially from our funding perspective. So yes, we try to support the downstream manufacturing, but based on an economic viable business model as well.
Okay, good. And then the last question, Mukesh, before I let you go, is does the strategy that you present include bioenergy production?
That will fall within, that's a different unit that we have. What I have covered was purely on PV and wind at this stage, but we're willing to look at, you know, if you do have if there is a business case around it, we're willing to engage.
Thank you for that. Franz, a question from Jan is, did you fabricate the mounting and support structures yourself?
Jan, we manufactured a lot of it. All of it was manufactured in South Africa. We utilize a more comprehensive methodology to manufacturing. For example, the aluminium was manufactured by a significant aluminium extruder in South Africa, and we did post-fabrication as Lumax Energy. But the structure was completely designed by Lumax Energy.
Thank you very much. Ntombi, I think this one is for you, from Ungama. Is there a demand for machine components in the sector, and is there a central database for registration to supply them? Or is there a wind energy supply chain forum, like in the auto sector, where industry supply chain managers can meet prospective suppliers?
No, we don't have a supply chain forum or supply forum. I think it's a good idea, something that we're willing to consider as an industry association, and I think for you, SAPVIA as well. It's something that we can really conceptualize and try to put together. And thanks for that suggestion.
Great, thanks, Ntombi. I think we have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to stop the Q&A there. Panelists, are there any questions that you really are burning that you really want to provide an answer to?
There was a couple of requests for Mukesh's contact details. If he's comfortable sharing his email address, he'll just post it on the chat reply.
I think we covered that. The contact details are on his slide presentation, which will be shared, and all of the panelists are happy to share their contact details after the session. Thanks, Antonio. Good. I think with that then, let me just do a quick summary. So thank you very much to the speakers and the panelists for providing your insights and your knowledge within the local manufacturing space. We started off the session with Francis covering the economics of local manufacturing, the job creation potential, future possible scenarios, the challenges in detail were discussed. And what I really liked is the possible solutions and where to next and what we really need to be focusing on to move forward. Discussing the investment potential decision-making process, and then the diverse models that could be applied to local manufacturing in South Africa. Angelina, from an OEM point of view, talked about the local manufacturing opportunities in wind. She covered, most importantly, the success factors that they believe promote local manufacturing, future-looking solutions as to what people can practically do, unpacking participation in the local value chain, practically reviewing on how local supply chains are created across various disciplines within the wind sector. We then had Conrad, who covered local manufacturing opportunities in solar PV, really just taking stock of where we are currently with local manufacturing or the landscape here in South Africa, covering the possibilities and what next and in what we can do. The case studies by Valentino at CS Renewable and by Franz at Lumax Energy covered local components at global standards, I think was the key message here. The potential and opportunities in real life, the skills and job requirements and opportunities to locally manufacture components, South African participation through a global context, potential of an export market, and most importantly, we heard that you need to add value to be competitive to compete in this space. Then we closed off the session with Mukesh from the IDC, covering the funding strategies for local manufacturing, the key tagline here to replace imports, localize and create an export market, explaining the different funding mechanisms that the IDC has in the programs where people can apply, giving us a global outlook on where solar PV and wind is, assessing the potential for every component across solar PV and wind supply chains is really important. It gives you a good indication of where the opportunities lie in the South African market, and moving to the long-term opportunities and sustainability. I've said this a number of times and I'm going to say it again. Local manufacturing is key for the renewable energy sector. It needs to be done responsibly and it needs to be done sustainably so we can do this for a long-term period. We need all stakeholders to come together and hold hands to make sure we have a framework in South Africa that encourages more local participation, more local manufacturing, and being able to do more within the renewable energy sector. With that, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the speakers for sharing your knowledge. The presentations will be made available. Have a good evening further.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.